Families don't fall apart overnight, they break piece by piece, and many times it's because women lose control of themselves. Today, I'm going to expose why some women overgo crazy and tear their own families apart, and how men can recognize it before it's too late. One of the biggest reasons why women lose themselves, create unnecessary drama, and eventually damage their families is because of the unrealistic expectations and comparison trap. This mindset is not only dangerous, it is destructive. A woman who constantly measures her happiness and her family's worth against someone else's life is never truly present in her own. And when she is never satisfied, she cannot give peace to the people around her. Think about it. We live in a world where social media has completely reshaped how women view relationships and family life. The endless scrolling, the constant exposure to perfect couples, expensive vacations, luxurious homes, and filtered smiles creates a deep sense of dissatisfaction. A woman sees another wife posting pictures with her husband holding flowers, and suddenly she feels her man is not romantic enough. She sees another family living in a bigger house, and now her home feels too small. She sees someone else's children dressed in expensive clothes, and now her own children's happiness no longer feels sufficient. What started as innocent browsing turns into silent resentment against her own reality. The truth is, comparison steals gratitude, and once gratitude leaves, contentment disappears. A woman who is constantly comparing lives in a state of mental restlessness. She convinces herself that her husband should be doing more, her children should be achieving more, her family should be wealthier, more glamorous, more exciting. But the tragedy is that these expectations are rarely based on reality. They are based on illusions, carefully curated online images, or half-truths told by other women trying to impress society. Yet the woman who consumes them takes them as real and sets them as her new standard. She begins demanding things from her family that are neither natural nor necessary, but she cannot see that because she is already trapped in the cycle. This cycle creates silent pressure in the household. The husband starts feeling inadequate no matter what he does. The children start feeling like they are never enough in their mother's eyes. The woman starts resenting her own life without realizing she is poisoning her own peace. Every time she looks outside, she feels her own home is failing. And this dissatisfaction leaks into her words, her attitude, her energy. Families don't break apart because of one big fight. They break apart because of this slow, consistent dissatisfaction that eats away at the bond of love. Unrealistic expectations also grow when women consume too many romanticized ideas of what marriage and family life should look like. They see movies, TV shows, or influencers portraying grand gestures of love and constant excitement. They convince themselves that marriage is supposed to be nonstop passion, surprises, and butterflies. When reality doesn't match the fantasy, they feel disappointed. But marriage was never meant to be a movie script. Real life is about partnership, support, growth, and building together through struggles. When a woman is blinded by fantasy, she cannot value reality. And instead of seeing her husband's effort, his loyalty, his hard work, she complains about what he isn't doing like other men. Instead of appreciating her children's unique personalities, she wishes they were like someone else's kids. This toxic pattern leads to one thing: constant criticism. A woman caught in unrealistic expectations becomes hyper-focused on what her family lacks instead of nurturing what they have. Every small mistake becomes magnified. Every shortcoming feels unbearable. She begins to nag, complain, and argue more often, and slowly the atmosphere of the home changes. The husband feels drained, the children feel unloved, the woman herself feels empty. And yet she doesn't see the root cause, her addiction to comparing and expecting a reality that doesn't exist. One of the most destructive forces inside a family is when a woman lets her emotions rule her entire life. This is what I call emotional overdrive. It is when emotions are no longer a natural part of her personality, but instead become the driver of every action, every decision, and every reaction. When a woman allows anger, jealousy, insecurity, or mood swings to dominate her, she becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is dangerous for relationships because love and stability cannot exist in a storm that never settles. Women are naturally more emotional than men, and that is not a weakness. It is part of their design. But when that gift of sensitivity and emotional intelligence is not controlled, it becomes toxic. A woman in emotional overdrive doesn't think before she speaks. She doesn't pause before reacting. She explodes in anger, cries uncontrollably, throws accusations, or withdraws into silent treatments. She turns minor issues into massive conflicts because she cannot regulate her inner state. The problem is not that she feels too much. The problem is that she never learned how to manage what she feels. This behavior creates deep cracks inside the family. Imagine a husband coming home after a long day, already tired, and instead of peace, he is greeted with unnecessary arguments because of some imagined insecurity. Imagine children growing up in a house where their mother's moods shift like weather, smiling one moment, shouting the next. That environment shapes them in ways that can last a lifetime. They either grow up anxious and fearful, or they normalize chaos as love, which damages their future relationships. A woman who lets her emotions overflow without control ends up creating wounds in her family that are not visible, but are deeply felt. Emotional overdrive also makes communication impossible. When a woman is constantly reacting instead of reflecting, she cannot truly listen. She doesn't hear her husband's words. She hears her own fears echoing inside her head. She doesn't understand her children's struggles. She interprets them through her frustration. The family begins to feel like they are walking on eggshells, afraid of triggering her next explosion. Love cannot grow in an atmosphere of fear, and respect disappears when emotions turn into weapons. Another dangerous part of emotional overdrive is how it often shifts blame. Instead of recognizing that her emotions are her own responsibility, the woman projects them onto others. If she feels insecure, she accuses her husband of being unloving. If she feels jealous, she finds reasons to attack. If she feels lonely, she blames everyone else for neglecting her. This constant projection drains the family because no one can ever do enough to satisfy her unstable inner world. It is like pouring water into a bottomless cup. It never fills. And let's not ignore how society encourages this. Women are often told that expressing emotions openly is strength, but they are rarely told about the importance of emotional discipline. There is a difference between being in touch with your emotions and being controlled by them. Unfortunately, when women confuse the two, they mistake volatility for honesty. They think lashing out is being real. They think crying for hours is showing depth. But in reality, it is not depth, it is lack of control. And lack of control slowly erodes every bond she has. What makes emotional overdrive even more dangerous is that it is contagious. If a woman is always anxious, the family becomes anxious. If she is always angry, the home atmosphere becomes heavy. If she is always suspicious, trust evaporates. Children mirror what they see. Husbands distance themselves when peace is constantly disturbed. And soon, the woman finds herself isolated, yet still drowning in her own emotional storms. One of the most toxic patterns that destroys families from the inside is when a woman develops an obsessive need to control everything. It starts subtly with small criticisms and constant instructions, but over time it grows into a suffocating presence that drains the life out of a household. The need for control may come from insecurity, fear of abandonment, or even a desire to feel important. But whatever the root cause is, the result is always the same: broken trust, broken intimacy, and broken families. A woman who constantly seeks control often believes she is protecting her family, guiding them, or doing what's best. But in reality, she is crushing the natural balance of a home. She wants to dictate how the husband spends his time, how the children behave, how decisions are made, and even how emotions are expressed. Nothing is left to flow naturally because her hand is always present, pressing down, shaping, forcing. And instead of creating order, this control creates resistance. A husband resents it, children rebel against it. Slowly, her family stops seeing her as a source of love and starts seeing her as a source of stress. When a woman falls into this trap, she often doesn't realize how damaging it is. She convinces herself that her husband needs her reminders, her monitoring, her corrections. She convinces herself that her children will fail without her constant supervision. But what she doesn't see is that her control robs the man of his dignity and the children of their independence. A man who feels like he is being constantly managed by his wife loses the desire to lead, to provide, to protect. He feels emasculated, like a boy under authority rather than a man in partnership. And children who grow up under excessive control often lack confidence because they are never allowed to make mistakes and learn. The psychology behind control is rooted in fear. Many women fear losing love, fear betrayal, fear uncertainty, and in response, they tighten their grip on the people around them. They believe that by controlling everything, they can prevent disappointment or chaos. But ironically, this fear-driven behavior creates exactly what they are trying to avoid. The more control a woman imposes, the more distant her husband becomes, the more rebellious her children grow, and the more unstable the family unit feels. Control is not security. Control is the opposite of security. It is the constant reminder that trust does not exist. In relationships, control kills intimacy. A man does not feel loved when he is constantly corrected, monitored, or belittled. He feels suffocated. He begins to withdraw, to disconnect emotionally, and sometimes even physically. And when he withdraws, the woman panics even more, which makes her tighten her grip further. It becomes a vicious cycle. She tries to control more to feel safe. And the more she controls, the more unsafe the relationship becomes. This cycle repeats until the bond collapses under the weight of mistrust and resentment. Control also manifests in subtle manipulations, not just direct orders. It can come in the form of guilt-tripping, silent treatments, emotional blackmail, or constant criticism disguised as help. These behaviors slowly eat away at the spirit of a man and the confidence of children. It creates an environment where nobody feels free to be themselves because every action is measured against the controlling woman's approval. Families thrive on freedom and trust, not fear and restriction, and when those are removed, the home turns into a prison. The saddest part is that many women who fall into this pattern are not bad people. They are often deeply insecure, sometimes shaped by their own past experiences of abandonment, betrayal, or lack of control in childhood. They seek control as a way to protect themselves from pain, but in the process of protecting themselves, they end up inflicting pain on everyone else. And instead of building a strong family, they unknowingly destroy the very foundation they are trying to protect. One of the most silent yet destructive behaviors that tears families apart is when a woman becomes addicted to validation. This is not the healthy desire to be appreciated by her loved ones, which is natural for every human being. This is something far more dangerous. It is the insatiable hunger for approval from the outside world. A woman in this state measures her worth not by the love and stability of her own home, but by how many people admire her, praise her, envy her, or acknowledge her. She starts to live for attention, and once attention becomes her drug, her family inevitably becomes her sacrifice. Validation addiction begins slowly, almost unnoticeably. It might start with a woman enjoying compliments from friends or the thrill of posting pictures on social media and getting likes. But over time, those little moments of attention are no longer enough. She craves more. She needs constant reminders that she is beautiful, desirable, valuable. She needs to be seen, admired, and reassured not just by her husband and children, but by people outside her home, sometimes strangers who have no real connection to her. Her self-esteem becomes tied to the approval of others, and this creates a dangerous imbalance. When a woman is addicted to validation, her priorities shift. Instead of pouring her energy into nurturing her family, she begins investing it into how she looks to the outside world. The time that could have been spent building her marriage is spent scrolling, posting, editing, and comparing. The attention she gives her children weakens because she is more concerned with how she is perceived. Even her husband begins to feel like he is competing with the audience she has built in her head, an audience that claps for her but never truly knows her. Families collapse not because of one big betrayal, but because of the thousand small ways in which they stop being the center of each other's worlds. And validation addiction accelerates this erosion. Another toxic element of validation addiction is how it creates emotional instability. A woman who thrives on external approval is happy only when she gets it. If her post is liked, she feels worthy. If her friend compliments her, she feels beautiful. But the moment the attention fades, or when she sees another woman receiving more admiration, her mood shifts. She becomes irritable, dissatisfied, insecure. This emotional roller coaster spills into the family dynamic because her husband and children are forced to live under the shadow of her unstable self-worth. They feel the tension, the constant need to reassure her, the pressure to keep her satisfied when in reality, no amount of validation at home will ever be enough because her appetite for it is external and limitless. Validation addiction also distorts relationships. Instead of valuing her husband for his loyalty, his effort, and his presence, she may start comparing him to the men she sees online or the ones who flatter her outside the marriage. She may begin to test his devotion constantly, demanding more and more proof of love because the root issue is not his lack of love, but her endless craving for reassurance. And when children grow up in such an environment, they too learn that worth is not found in character, discipline, or inner strength, but in external approval. They learn to chase applause rather than integrity, and the cycle of emptiness continues. The irony of validation addiction is that the woman who seeks approval outside often ends up losing respect inside her home. A husband cannot feel deeply connected to a wife who is constantly chasing the world's attention. Children cannot feel fully secure with a mother who is emotionally absent, even if she is physically present. And the woman herself cannot feel truly fulfilled because validation is like salt water. The more she drinks, the thirstier she becomes. It is an endless chase. And in the process of chasing it, she loses sight of what truly matters. One of the most corrosive mindsets that slowly destroys relationships and families is the victim mentality. This is when a woman positions herself not as an equal partner in her family, but as the constant sufferer, the one who is always wronged, always unappreciated, always carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. At first, it may appear harmless or even sympathetic. After all, everyone struggles at times and deserves compassion. But when a woman makes victimhood her identity, it becomes a weapon, one that manipulates, divides, and erodes the foundation of the family. The victim mentality thrives on blame. A woman who has adopted this mindset rarely takes responsibility for her actions, her words, or even her emotions. Instead, she frames herself as the one who is misunderstood, mistreated, or undervalued. If there is conflict in the marriage, she claims her husband does not support her. If the children misbehave, she blames them for stressing her out. If life feels difficult, she blames circumstances, society, or anyone else she can point to. The victim mindset allows her to avoid accountability, but the cost is high because every time she shifts blame outward, she weakens the bonds within her own home. Living with someone who constantly plays the victim is emotionally draining. The husband begins to feel guilty no matter what he does because nothing is ever enough to satisfy her sense of suffering. He may provide support, love, and sacrifice, yet she will still say, "Nobody cares about me, nobody values me, I do everything alone." Over time, this repeated narrative conditions the husband to feel that he is always failing, even when he is doing his best. Instead of gratitude, he receives guilt. Instead of appreciation, he receives accusations. And no man can thrive under a weight that never lifts. For the children, the damage can be even greater. A mother with a victim mentality unintentionally teaches her children that love comes with guilt. They grow up feeling responsible for her unhappiness, believing that they can never do enough to please her. Some children become people pleasers, bending over backward to earn affection that never fully comes. Others rebel, distancing themselves emotionally because they cannot carry the burden of her constant complaints. In both cases, the victim mentality creates a distorted view of family love, one that is conditional, heavy, and suffocating. Another destructive aspect of victim mentality is how it manipulates through emotional blackmail. A woman who sees herself as the perpetual victim often uses tears, silence, or dramatic language to win arguments or control situations. Instead of resolving issues with maturity, she leans into pity. She creates an atmosphere where her husband and children feel trapped between caring for her and resenting her. The family learns to tiptoe around her moods, avoiding confrontation, because every disagreement ends with her painting herself as the one who suffers most. This kills open communication and leaves behind an undercurrent of resentment. The psychology behind victim mentality is often rooted in insecurity and fear of rejection. Many women who fall into this mindset do not consciously choose it. They may have grown up in environments where love was conditional, where they had to exaggerate their pain to receive attention. As adults, they carry that same strategy into their marriages and families. But instead of building deeper connections, this habit drives wedges between people. When someone always sees themselves as the victim, they cannot build equal, healthy partnerships because partnerships require accountability and responsibility from both sides. Victim mentality also feeds on exaggeration. Small disagreements turn into dramatic stories of mistreatment. Minor struggles become evidence of deep betrayal. The woman convinces herself that her life is uniquely difficult, and this belief isolates her from gratitude. She cannot see the blessings she has because she is too focused on the hardships she chooses to highlight. And when she convinces herself she is unloved or unsupported, her behavior begins to reflect that belief, creating coldness, distance, and hostility in the family. One of the greatest tragedies in modern relationships is when women forget the true power of their femininity and the sacred role of partnership within the family. Instead of embracing their unique qualities and nurturing the natural balance between man and woman, many women today have been conditioned to believe that competing with men, challenging them at every step, or devaluing their role somehow elevates them. In chasing this illusion of strength, they end up neglecting the very qualities that once held families together: softness, nurturing, grace, respect, and partnership. When femininity is abandoned, the family unit loses harmony because the roles that create balance are no longer being fulfilled. Femininity is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not silence. It is the strength to soften when the world is hard. It is the ability to nurture, to connect, to bring warmth into a household that would otherwise feel cold and mechanical. It is the gift of influence without force, persuasion without control, guidance without domination. A woman who embraces her femininity does not need to shout to be heard because her presence itself speaks. But when femininity is neglected, a woman often shifts into a hardened version of herself, defensive, combative, controlling, unable to rest in her natural energy. This shift not only drains her, but also destabilizes her family. The husband feels the difference immediately. A man thrives when he feels respected, valued, and allowed to lead. This does not mean domination. It means he carries his responsibilities as protector and provider without constant criticism or opposition. But when a woman neglects her femininity and tries to step into his role, tension begins. Instead of supporting each other, they begin to compete. Instead of working as partners, they become rivals. The man starts withdrawing, the woman starts resenting, and the partnership dissolves into a power struggle where nobody truly wins. Children, too, are affected by this neglect. Boys growing up in such homes may struggle with their own masculinity because they do not see a model of balance between man and woman. Girls may grow up believing that femininity is weakness, that softness must always be suppressed, that nurturing is a burden instead of a strength. And in this way, the generational cycle continues, homes without harmony producing children who carry that imbalance into their own relationships. Partnership is what keeps families alive. It is not about one person dominating the other. It is about complementary strengths, masculinity and femininity working together like two wings of a bird. When one wing tries to dominate the other, the bird cannot fly. In the same way, when women neglect their role as partners and instead adopt the belief that they must carry everything alone or compete with their men, the family loses its ability to soar. Partnership means recognizing that men and women are not the same, but they are equal in value, different in function, and strongest when they operate in alignment. Neglecting femininity often shows up in subtle ways. A woman stops showing appreciation for her husband's efforts, dismissing them as bare minimum. She stops caring about creating a peaceful environment in the home, believing it is not her responsibility. She abandons softness in her communication and replaces it with criticism, sarcasm, or indifference. She stops respecting the masculine energy in her man and instead challenges it at every opportunity, believing that her worth depends on proving she can be above him. Over time, these small shifts accumulate, and what was once a bond of love and respect becomes a battlefield of egos. At its core, neglecting femininity and partnership is not about rejecting men, it is about rejecting balance. It is about rejecting the natural flow of give and take, the harmony of different strengths working together. And once that balance is gone, the family begins to weaken because no home can survive in a constant state of rivalry. At the heart of every strong society lies the family, and at the heart of every family lies the woman. When she is stable, grateful, and balanced, she becomes the anchor that keeps everyone grounded. But when she loses herself to comparison, emotional chaos, control, validation, addiction, victimhood, and the neglect of her true feminine power, she becomes the very force that dismantles the home she was meant to protect. Families don't collapse overnight. They break slowly, piece by piece, through repeated patterns of dissatisfaction, manipulation, and imbalance. And the painful reality is this: many women who destroy their families don't even realize they are doing it because they confuse their destructive behaviors for strength, for love, or for just being themselves. But true strength is not in tearing down, it is in building up. True love is not in controlling, it is in nurturing. True power is not in victimhood, it is in accountability. If women want to protect their families, they must reclaim their responsibility. They must stop comparing, stop chasing validation, stop drowning in emotions, stop competing with their men, and instead learn the art of partnership, respect, and emotional discipline. Because the woman is the emotional thermostat of the home. If she is at peace, her family feels peace. If she is constantly in chaos, her family will collapse in chaos with her. The truth is simple. A wise woman can build a kingdom out of nothing, but a foolish woman can burn down a palace with her own hands.